pumpkin carving. So this video is meant to inform you all out there how to get involved, if you're interested, in carving a clay pumpkin. This is my 9th year doing the pumpkin event for the Craft Center. I've got a pumpkin from each year that I've done over here, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit, although Katie is panning for the Instagram world. And I've got some tools, and I've got some examples. I've been carving one today, and we're going to, I'm going to carve the other half of that pumpkin live right here. But in case you're wondering, the way that you get to carve your own pumpkin is by going online to the Craft Center's website. That's ncsu.edu/crafts, and you can find a couple different ways. You can find a link to register for the clay pumpkin event. A couple of weeks ago there were 75 seats available, and I happen to know that as of today we've sold like 68 pumpkins or so. Really, it's great. But as of today, I've also expanded that, so there are now way more pumpkins for you to purchase. And Paul, our office manager, created a new instance where you can purchase up to 6 pumpkins if you want. You might be interested in carving pumpkins with your whole family, and that's really what this is all about. I personally love carving pumpkins. If my mom's out there watching, maybe she can comment on the fact that we carve pumpkins growing up in Connecticut a lot. Katie's here behind the camera. Did you carve pumpkins, Katie?
Once, as a student.
Once as a student on campus? Well, maybe we can carve real pumpkins together in life one day.
Perhaps.
It'd be super fun. Alright, so we talked about how to register. This video, I should mention, is going to get emailed to anybody that's registered to carve a pumpkin, which is really why we're doing it. It's kind of like an instructional how-to. When you get registered for your pumpkin, you're going to need to follow some of the instructions and send me an email, which is how you set up your appointment to pick up your pumpkin. What you pick up is going to look like this. It's a pumpkin in a plastic bubble, and there's also going to be a sheet of paper that's got some instructions on what to do and what not to do, and it's got a very fantastic poem written just for you this year. It's kind of a tradition. Hope you like it. And you're going to pick up your pumpkin, and then you have until October 15th, I believe, at 9 p.m. or so to come in and carve that pumpkin and or get your pumpkin, take it home, carve it, do whatever you're going to do, and bring it back to me. You will have to set up another appointment to get that pumpkin back to me. It's going to be great. Everything is about 15 minutes apart. Shouldn't really be a need to have anybody overlap, unless I sell like 500 pumpkins, right? Which I'm up for it. I'm thinking I'm actually going to do the next round of pumpkins with a different clay body, and that's totally against what I've always said. If I make more, I like to keep it the same type, but it could be fun.
What clay body is this?
This clay body is a clay body made by Star Works in North Carolina. It's called Grogowini. It's very rough on the hands when you throw, and I made 82 pumpkins, and I did some damage to this fingernail and that fingernail, but I might do it again in Star White, which would make the glaze look a little different. These pumpkins here, over the last 9 years, I've changed clay bodies in the studio several times, so a couple of them aren't exactly good representations of what the glaze might look like. The glaze itself is called pumpkin. Perfect. But on some of them, in a little while, you'll see that the pumpkin turned a little bit more red or a little more white, and that's just because of where it was in the gas kiln and the kind of clay body that it was made of. So, anyway, what's next? I've kind of got a list of talking points over here to help me not forget. We talked about appointments and how to register. We have 3 people. All right. We getting any comments? Anybody want to say hi?
We're waving at all kinds of people.
Look, I loved it.
What do you got under that bag there?
This is my pumpkin right here that I've been carving. So, I know, right? Well, before I talk about my pumpkin, it's really important when you're working on your pumpkin, and I'm going to remind you of this later, but if you're working on your pumpkin, you want to keep it unwrapped, but if you walk away, let's say you go take a phone call for 10 minutes, you really want to make sure you cover it up, because if your pumpkin dries out, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be easy to work on it. So keep it wrapped up, and even when you're done with it, keep it wrapped up, because transporting a pumpkin or 6 in your car is really even more dangerous if it's bone dry.
Somebody wants to know if this could be kid-friendly with adult supervision.
Could this be kid-friendly? Yes, this is very kid-friendly. I'll get into the tools a little bit. Like one of the tools that I've got is like a kitchen steak knife, and I've put some painter's tape onto it. But there's no reason you couldn't give kids like the plastic fork, knife, and spoon. Popsicle sticks are a good one. I have chopsticks over here. Yes, totally kid-friendly. I would definitely recommend the adult supervision in case the kid wants to like mush it into a pile. They are pretty squishy because all the pumpkins were made at a different time. Some of the ones I made on Monday might be a little bit drier than the ones that I made on Tuesday, but it's definitely possible to overwork your pumpkin. Pretty cool. Well, let's look at the tools, actually. A good segue, person with children. Facebook, wherever you are over there, you'll have to deal with it. I went into my kitchen and into my studio, and I gathered a bunch of things that I thought would give good texture. All over the table, there's actually these little plastic fake spiders, which were decorations from last year, but I can totally use this as a stamp on my pumpkin, and I plan to tonight, so that's why he's here. I kind of went for the basic knife, fork, and spoon option, but again, I showed the steak knife. I wrapped up a lot of the blade part with some painter's tape, because when I'm holding on to this while I'm working, I don't want to hold this by the handle. It's too far away. When you're carving something made out of clay, you're going to get a whole lot more control if your hand is pretty close to what you're carving. And I actually, in case I forget to say this later, I like carving with the back side of the knife that's flat instead of the serrated part. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any non-serrated steak knives in my house. Go figure. But the grog, or the sand, the gritty part of the clay gets caught in the serrated knife, and it didn't move real smoothly. I could have brought a real fork, but I brought this plastic one. The nice thing about a plastic one is that if I decide I only want maybe 2 prongs, you know, to do some 2-line action, I could just break these off, and then whatever I break off is another tool. The end of this tool, the end of this fork could also be used as a stamp, as a groove, as a gouging tool. It's kind of like a nice scoop. I'm really into spoons, so I brought one of my favorite round spoons. This is going to be a great way to kind of like map out maybe some curves that you've got in mind, like an eyeball is something I talk about in this year's poem. A spatula. So in regular clay tools, we have a rubber rib. I had this was great. So like I love kitchen gadgets, and I use this a lot. I actually have it in like 2 or 3 colors. It's silicone. This acts like a rubber rib out of your kitchen, but this is like a hard rib. I don't even know what this is for. Is this like, I think this is like for scraping out a mixing bowl maybe. It's very small. I think I just bought it because it's purple. But this was great. On my pumpkin, I used this tool, something with a hard, thin edge, to kind of accentuate the curves of the pumpkin. I'll show you what I mean. I also grabbed some toothpicks. Toothpicks are going to be really great. For the kid version, you might want to use a chopstick, something not so pointed. They kind of can get lost in your workspace, and I have totally jabbed myself with a toothpick. This is what you're going to use to kind of sketch out what you're doing on the surface. Your toothpick, I grabbed like 5 or 6 of them. I also got a giant nail. This has been my favorite tool so far. What you're going to see on my pumpkin, I use this nail a lot. This end of it just really, I don't know, it spoke to me. So definitely go with what speaks to you. Speaking of speaking to you, I think this was my grandmother Lillian's, my mom's mom. I already have, what would you call this? This is a
Meat cleaver.
like a meat cleaver, right? No, isn't a cleaver a knife or is this a?
Oh, it's a meat cleaver.
Okay. Yeah, I already have one of these made out of wood, but hers was metal and it's pretty vintage. I love it. And I thought that would be really good texture. Yes, if you were to hammer your pumpkin with this, it will start to collapse. So this is one of those tools that if you're actually trying to use it for the texture, you're going to kind of support the back side of the pumpkin or the inside if you can. We'll talk about that.
Meat tenderizer.
Meat
tenderizer.
Did somebody comment that?
Yeah.
Meat tender. Thank you. Yeah, it was like a meat. I have a cleaver. It's like a bigger version of this. Anyway, I brought a tenderizer. So this guy, I don't know. Anybody? Is this how you make waffle fries? Is this a cheese cutter? Am I gonna cut the cheese with this? I don't know. Another thing that I got from my grandmother's kitchen. Never used it. I just liked the way it looked. And I might not use it today, but I just brought it to give you an example of there are a lot of things I already know in your kitchen, unless you just don't use your kitchen. There's a lot of things in there that can maybe make cool textures, so give it a shot. I could see this like cutting through the pumpkin and maybe making some eyebrows or something. I don't know, could be fun. I brought chopsticks because why not? I love chopsticks. I have a lot of fancy chopsticks. My friend Matt got me some from South Korea, I think, when he was there. They're metal. They're very hard to use. These are from Panda Express, I think. And I don't even eat there, which was weird to find them in my kitchen. But I can use this in many ways. We'll get there. What else? I found a screw. I got that. You know, I can roll this along the surface. I can use it to poke holes. The head of it, little textures all over the place. If you're wanting to kind of have something to, you know, replicate like the size of a bolt in the neck, if you want to give your pumpkin some neck bolts, that could be cool. A zip tie. I don't know. I saw it and I was like, let me bring it. What would happen if I pushed that little end into the clay? One of the things I like to tell people when we first sit down, normally this event is in our craft center lobby, and there's like 25 to 30 people, and everybody's seated, and we get a big conversation going about carving pumpkins and making all this texture, and also carving through that pumpkin. But whatever you can do to create lots of surface texture, I'll show you what I mean with the last year's pumpkins, is going to make extra fun with your glaze. I brought a ruler, and I'm not sure why, because I'm not measuring anything. I did find, talk about kid-friendly, a bucket of alphabet and letter stamps. I don't even know if I have the whole alphabet here, so I'm going to refrain from using them. I would probably carve out the letters myself, but if you're not into carving actual, you know, recognizable shapes, I mean, you're just going to go for it, then maybe these letter stamps are good for you. Pretty cute. I got a yogurt cup. If you have two of these, you're going to need something to put water in, and you're going to need something that acts like a paintbrush. If you don't have a paintbrush, don't go buy one. You can just roll up some paper towel and twist it and use the end of the paper towel like a paintbrush. It's perfect.
Would a Q-tip work?
A Q-tip would work if it was like, you know, that good quality Q-tip, like it's fluffy. Like I love Q-tips, but I hate a cheap Q-tip. Like when you go to a hotel and they're like, here, have 6 Q-tips, and they're just sticks. I don't like it. Anyway, so.
You've been to hotels that give out Q-tips?
Yeah, like the little complimentary thing in the bathroom.
Never seen that.
Really?
Yeah.
I got on a flight one time to Seattle. That was interesting. It was like peanuts, Q-tips, blanket. The cup, the yogurt cup, or some kind of little container. You just want a way to have some water that you can maybe put some of your little clay scraps that are going to fall off, the teeny tiny little bits that are going to get all over your workspace. You're going to mix it up in there with the water, shake it around, and this is going to be like your glue if you plan on putting anything together or adding anything onto your pumpkin. And we'll talk about that. I found a garlic press, made in Italy, also from my grandmother's kitchen. I don't really know if I want to put clay into this because then I got to take clay out of it. That being said, all of this clay is non-toxic. It's going to wash out. It's probably going to be easier for you, like if it gets in these little holes, if you let it dry out completely before you try and wash it. That'll really make sure it comes out the next time. I thought that this would be cool to like put some clay into and make some hair.
Like Play-Doh.
Yeah, Play-Doh. But what comes out of this little garlic press is going to be really fine and fragile. And I want to deter you from doing anything really fine and really fragile. That being said, you could still do this and like really push it into the surface and make it look like hair instead of like fuzz. Does that make sense? Like differentiate between hair and fuzz. I'm looking at you, Katie. You're my audience.
Yeah, I'm
This
here.
is great having eyes. If I was doing this alone, I'd be terrified. And I got a can. This is Canada Dry Diet Ginger Ale. I believe this was John's. And I noticed this for two reasons. So it's got a nice rounded bottom. And also the bottom of this can is about 2 inches in diameter, I believe. Ooh, there's still some ginger ale in there. Let me see. Yeah, right at 2. So we're going to go pivot to over here. If you're interested in putting a tea light inside of your candle, then this comes in really handy. Actually, the yogurt cup, that's why I grabbed 2 of them, comes in really handy as well. But you can push the bottom of this can or your yogurt cup into the bottom of your pumpkin a little bit and create a circular line that you can then cut out, and then your tea light will fit right into it. It's pretty sweet. If you're gonna put a tea light into it, it's gonna be electric, like this guy right here. These pumpkins are not big enough for regular candles. They're just gonna get really hot and burn out. Joellen, our assistant manager, had a whole box of these. They're not super bright, but they look really cute in the dark inside a pumpkin.
Gotta be festive and safe.
Festive and safe. Let's turn that back on. And that's what I mean by cutting the bottom out. This one, I don't think I measured with a Coke can on this guy, but it fits pretty well. There's another one over here where I kind of like guessed. Don't guess. Make sure the bottom of your pumpkin, if you want to put a tea light in it, has at least a 2-inch diameter hole. Super important. Okay, good. We feel good about tools. I think that could be kid safe. The funnest thing for me when I was gathering all this stuff from my house was thinking about what I normally have in a play studio. A fiddling knife, a wooden knife, a rubber rib, maybe my needle tool, and these little sculpting blades, kind of similar to like palette knives that you would paint with on a very small scale. It was like a little scavenger hunt to find what I wanted to use. Super fun. That being said, I have my own studio at my house, so even today while I was working on this pumpkin, I was looking around for my sculpting tools and not my spatula. So I'm sure the next time I cook dinner with this, I'm going to have some pumpkin spice memories. Also, I picked the orange one, not the blue one, because we're carving pumpkins. Alright, so this is, I'm going to show you where I'm at, so we can kind of focus on pumpkins. Oh, I also forgot the can. Can everybody see the can? So this is a can of butter beans. Irrelevant. Could be salsa. Could be what? What's your can going to be, Katie?
My can would probably be green beans.
Green
which is
beans.
another bean.
It is a bean. It could be dog food too. Zoo likes.
She does really enjoy green beans.
Zoo likes green beans and dog food. I brought a can, a larger can if you have one, as a pedestal. It's a way to lift the work up. So if you aren't sitting at a really, or if you are sitting at a really low table, you don't want to be kind of bending over. Your neck's going to get really sore, so it's important to lift your work up. So it gives you a way to also turn it and not have it stick to whatever surface you're working on, which for me is newspaper. Spread the newspaper everywhere. When you're done, you can just throw it all away. It acts as a great surface to kind of dab your paintbrush on, should you need to get rid of some water. But yeah, the wet clay pumpkin, if I put this on the newspaper, moves the pumpkin.
Let's say I don't have newspaper at home. What could I use instead?
If you don't have newspaper, great question. You could use a pillowcase, which is what I use in my hand building a mug in your kitchen video that you can find on our Craft Center YouTube page. You could use, you could spread out some mail that you got and just open up random envelopes. You could even use a plastic bag, which brings me to the sponge. If you've got some sort of a sponge, this is another thing that you might want to find. This is basically here to be some kind of a support system. So when I'm working on my pumpkin, if I just keep plopping it down on the table and not cradling it in my hand, it's going to get a little bit of a flat spot. So having a dry sponge or a wadded up shirt that you are going to put in the laundry can give you a little space to safely, work with your pumpkin. Also, I've worked and made this side look a certain way, and while I'm working on the other side, I don't want to be bashing in all that work that I did. Which is an eyeball.
Ooh.
Oh, creepy.
Let's come get a closer look at that eyeball.
Let's let Instagram get a closer look. So I did this eyeball with the bottom of the Coke can. I pushed it in the center, and again, that dome that's inside the, or not the Coke can, the Canada Dry can, the dome made it really spherical, which was perfect. And then, as I mentioned, this nail turned out to be pretty great for me. I used the nail to create all of the dots and the texture to kind of make it look like some other type of skin on the surface, which this is the texture that I'm talking about that's going to work magic with the glaze. Like, we can take our pumpkin and just dip it in the pumpkin glaze, and it's going to be really smooth. It's getting this orange and white glaze color because of where it was in the kiln. Again, we fire in a cone 10 gas reduction kiln. But if I have a whole lot of carving and stuff on top of it, then the glaze is going to change a little bit and bring in more shadow and accentuate that carving a little more. Did all the dots with the nails kind of over and over again. The ladies from my tiles with texture class know this texture as furry. Just kind of poking at it. And then I did the center of the eyeball, or what's the colorful part?
The iris?
Is it the iris? I believe it is the iris. Katie, 500. Eye anatomy. I did that with the nail kind of going out in a radial pattern, and then I cut the hole in the center of the eye, the pupil, and then I went back and kind of fine-tuned it. So essentially everything that I cut off of the pumpkin, talks about this in your take-home paper, everything that I cut off is what I have to put back onto the pumpkin. So as I'm working, I start collecting little bits of clay in my workspace, and I have a little, I didn't have much, but I'm also not done working. I have a little packet of clay that I kind of dab water into and work and set aside for when I want to maybe add cat ears or a funky wart on the nose, whatever it is. So don't just let your scraps dry out. If they're like this really tiny dust stuff, just put that in your slip cup. But the bigger pieces, hold on to them. What else do we have on here? Oh, and extra clay. Okay, so we see on this eyeball how it really looks like it's in the pumpkin. So after I made the iris and the pupil and defined all that, I took 2 coils of clay from my scrap, which I got because I cut the bottom off of my pumpkin. And I worked that clay, made it a little soft and pliable again, and then I rolled 2 coils, and I put them over the eye and under the eye, and then smoothed them out away from the eye, and it gave me that kind of sunken in look.
Like lips.
Like lips. You could do lips. Or a nose with like a big coil and 2 little coils on the side, and then you kind of get in there with your toothpick or your nail, and you smooth them all out and stuff. Once I was done with a lot of that, I went back with my paintbrush. Not a whole lot of water. In the instructions it talks about how a little bit of water goes a long way. And by that I mean a wet paintbrush can kind of slip into these places where my fingers can't get anymore and smooth everything out. Super nice. Alright. I I can't wait to see that with glaze on.
I can't wait either.
I can't wait. Alright, so before I work on the other side of my pumpkin, I want to do a little pumpkin tour, pumpkin inspiration. Normally these are all sitting out on the tables amongst everybody that's carving. I'm going to start with this one. If you are looking for a way to support the craft center, but you're not interested in picking up a pumpkin to carve, like I said, there are many more pumpkins available now. If I need to make 300 pumpkins, guys, I'll do it.
Say I won't.
Say I won't. Bet, right? That's
Yeah, bet.
Bet. But if you want to support the craft center, you're not interested in carving, but you want a pumpkin, you can just get on there and buy a pumpkin and send me a message and say, go ahead and glaze it, and I will probably just put your initials or your name into the bottom of it and just glaze a blank pumpkin for you.
Why does that one make noise when you shake it?
This one makes noise when I shake it because I rolled up a ball of clay and then I wrapped that little ball of clay in newspaper and I put it inside of the pumpkin.
Neat.
Yeah, just a little bit of newspaper though. Which one was next? I try and talk about them in the order that they were carved. This little spider just gotta go. This one says the craft center on one side of it. This one took me quite a while. The more detail that's on a pumpkin, guys, I mean the events that we have in the lobby are like 3 hours long, and it probably took me all of 3 hours to carve a good pumpkin. That being said, some people came into the event and just carved a happy pumpkin face and let it go, you know, so whatever speaks to you. On the back of this pumpkin, it looks like I've got a sun and a moon that kind of worked out, and this is supposed to be a candle, but I think it looks like a burnt out Christmas tree stump or something.
It's got Tim Burton vibes.
It's got Tim Burton vibes. So I think my plan was that I was gonna put a tea light in there and you'd be able to like see it, but then I didn't cut the bottom out of it. So if you're going to cut the bottom out of it, which you probably should because you want that extra clay, just do that first. But then I said, well, I can take like a little piece of aluminum foil and glue it there, like sculpt it into a little flame and then paint it later on. Clearly that didn't happen either, although these precious pumpkins live in my office in a drawer when it isn't the month of September and October. After that, I don't know what happened here. I know on one side I got a really cheesy one-eyed pumpkin face. This one was 2014, so I did a grave with the 2014 in it. You can see those numbers really well, right? Kind of stands out as 2014. If you really want what you carve into your pumpkin to stand out with glaze on top of it, make sure that it's really carved in there. We can't expect just a tiny scratch on the surface to show up. So like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch into the pumpkin. You know, if I draw a line, maybe I go back and I kind of dig out the sides of that line to help open it up a little more. I've got some clouds and some lightnings. I was just feeling really abstract with this pumpkin, and that's fine. Oh, and it's got a hole for the tea light. This one. This is a great example of what not to do. It's got that reddish pumpkin glaze color that I was talking about before. It's a clay body. This looks like orange stone, actually. We haven't had in a while. I did another grave on it, and it says RIP, but I can't tell what it's RIPing. And the glaze kind of overpowered it because I didn't write it and carve it in there heavy enough. This, Katie, can you guess what this is? This whole side, what does this whole side represent?
Negative space.
Negative thing.
It's a wolf.
It's a cat.
It's a cat,
It's like
obviously.
It's like a black cat up on its back with its crazy tail.
But of course.
This happened because I tried to carve out too much and I left too little. And all of these thin little like pieces, essentially what's in between the legs of the cat, they just kind of gave out. Probably because I was handling the pumpkin and I just accidentally pushed on it. So if you're gonna I'm not trying to say you can't do things like this and get really detailed, maybe save those cutouts for last. and do them at the end so that you're not accidentally pushing them forward. Also keep them a little bit thicker than this. These cat leg shadows, or cat flames, I don't know. They're about 1/4 of an inch wide, and I like to go a little bit thicker than that to make sure it's going to survive. Got this one where I was just covering it with texture. I did like a Tetris thing and a bunch of lines. Your pumpkin does not have to be for Halloween. This could be something that sits on your shelves all year long. Or it could go on your Thanksgiving table, because who doesn't love pumpkin spice at any meal this time of year? Also cut out, so this is, I cut out the hole, but there's absolutely no way light can get through this pumpkin. So, good job, Jennifer. That's nice. Maybe I just wanted the extra clay, but I didn't use extra clay. This pumpkin is a mummy. This one took me a while. I really love this one. It's one of my favorites. Kind of reminds Katie of pie. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it looks like a pie.
The lattice on a pie. There's an eyeball right in here. So what I did first with this one is I drew all of the mummy wrappings all over it, and then I went back and started carving into where they overlap. So I carved away from the ones that went behind another strap, and then I slapped an eyeball in there. Also a hole in the bottom, and this one has cutouts, so it worked out really well. I love that one. He's so cute. What do we have? This is fish skeleton. It's a whole fish with the skeleton as the cutout. I know this is black on this fish. That is not something that I can do for everybody's pumpkin. This is actually like an iron oxide. I wish I could customize your pumpkins that way, and sometimes I do, okay? Other pumpkin carvers can probably attest. If you put a tiny top hat on your pumpkin, or a little mouse on the shoulder, or a spider, I might paint it black as a surprise, but I can't promise it. And the back of this pumpkin is just a bunch of crazy carving and line work.
Kind of like desaturated Starry Night.
Desaturated Starry Night, yes. I'm loving it. This one,
that one
is my favorite. It says, "Witch, please."
Give it a rotate for the camera. Yeah.
I love this pumpkin. This was last year. It's got warts up here because she's a witch. And then on the back, I did a candelabra, which this one is my favorite one with the tea light inside of it. Because if you look at it from the right angle, it really shows those flames. It's even cooler in person. I wish you guys could see these.
We're seeing them now.
We got 6 people. Hi, everybody. Okay. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great. We got 25 minutes.
25 minutes left?
Yeah. You better get to carving.
Who knew I could talk for this long? Okay. I'm going to carve just a regular pumpkin face on the side of this pumpkin. I know I'm going to need my knife. I'm probably going to draw on it a little bit with my toothpick or my nail.
Have you picked a pumpkin face?
I haven't. And if you're wanting to create a little party or have some inspiration, I drew out some pumpkin faces. How does this one look?
Spooky.
It looks kind of spooky, also kind of magical, could be a dragon.
Kind of barbed wire serial killer too.
Yeah. I'm not feeling this one, but you might be. A lot of the times during this activity, what I ask or suggest that you do is pull out your cell phones and get on Google and Google search pumpkin faces. It's overwhelming. A lot of people will sit there and say that they're just staring at their phones for the first 20 minutes of the activity, but that's part of it. While they're staring, their pumpkin is wrapped up as to not dry out, but there's one. I like this guy. He's got it.
Simple.
Yeah.
Timeless.
He's kind of like dumbfounded in a way too. That's not how I'm feeling. This is a popular one. The what's the movie I'm thinking of? Nightmare Before Christmas?
Yeah, back to
Jack the Pumpkin King. That's a very popular pumpkin face, guys. Anything with a really, really wide mouth, you got to be careful about. Okay. I want you to picture if I carved this really, really wide mouth on this pumpkin down here, the top of the pumpkin might start to cave in on itself, okay? That's a reminder that I've got in the printout for everybody, but if your pumpkin starts to cave in on itself while you're carving, you gotta do one of a couple things. You gotta wad up some newspaper and shove it in some places, separate it, give it like some support, and walk away, let it dry. Very important.
The newspaper you're stuffing in there, is it wet or dry newspaper?
It's dry newspaper, and you're gonna crumble it so it's nice and soft. You can also take, if you've got scrap clay, you can take a little piece of clay, like half the size of a grape, and squish it into like a little teardrop shape and just wedge it in there. And you can actually leave it in there while it dries, and I'll pull it out before I fire it. Don't overwork it. I got a basic pumpkin face. He's kind of like, he doesn't know what's going on. He only has bottom teeth. Katie really likes his nose.
Yep. Inverted tooth.
Inverted tooth. This guy, I like this guy a lot. He's like, give him a sound, Katie. Woo! Woo! You can't see my face because of my mask, but I look just like this pumpkin right now. He's super cute. Like, he's shocked for Halloween. He might not actually fit on my pumpkin. And then the last one I have is this one, which I think is what I'm going to do right now. So the reason I drew this out on paper is because it's a great way to help maybe younger pumpkin carvers get their face onto their pumpkin. So I'm going to take my pumpkin, get my support behind him. I'm going to put plastic on top of my sponge just for a little extra support. I've got my piece of paper. For whatever reason, I used a thicker cardstock, but if you have just regular paper and you draw your pumpkin face on that piece of paper, then with a toothpick or maybe with the nail, you can trace right over the pumpkin face and kind of push through the paper, and it's going to transfer almost exactly, depending on how well
Coming in closer
they
to you.
trace.
Incoming.
Incoming. And it's going to leave a very light impression on the surface of the clay. I find that it's never exactly what I want, but it does help. Way easier with softer paper. No idea why I did cardstock.
You wanted a challenge.
I did want a challenge, and I'm telling you, it did not work very well. Luckily, I can redraw this. So, the unfortunate thing about live cameras is that you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing.
Until I get closer to you.
Katie's going to pop up behind me, it sounds like.
Just the old reach across.
Reach across. So I'm going to trace out my outline. This guy has no nose.
Not yet.
Katie and I were talking about pumpkins earlier. Doing that pumpkin that, like, you take what you like the guts of the actual pumpkin and then you like pour them out the side of the mouth when you're done. You could technically do that with these pumpkins. You just have to get like some canned pumpkin for later on. Alright, so I traced my crazy pumpkin face. Or I drew it on there. Freehand it, whatever you gotta do. And now I'm going to carve it out. I'm going to start with the eyes. As I mentioned earlier, I want to do some of the smaller negative spaces first, and I'm going to carve it out with the back side of the knife, the side that's really smooth. I'm going to hold my hand really close to the end of the blade. Not every pumpkin is the same thickness. So be patient with it. Alright, I got a nugget. So I want to make sure this nugget doesn't dry out. I'm gonna put my pumpkin down real quick, and I'm gonna add this fabulous piece of scrap clay to my little wrapped up pile right there. Maybe put a dab of water on him so that he moistens up a bit. All right, I'm gonna do my next eyeball. Who knew the first half hour would go by so quickly?
First 40 minutes.
Pumpkin carving is intense. Oh, I went a little too far.
Way to go.
I know. Well, that's the cool thing about clay, another nugget of clay in my wrapped up pile, is that if you cut too far, you can kind of get in there and smooth it back together as good as you can. This is why I like cutting the bottom out of my pumpkin, even if you don't have the intention of using a tea light, because while you're doing things to your pumpkin, it really helps to be able to hold it from the inside. If you're just kind of holding that gourd, you kind of don't have as much control. All right, so the mouth. I'm gonna start from the center of the mouth and go to the left, and then back to the center and to the right. This is gonna hopefully keep me from collapsing my face too quickly. That sounds like a personal problem. Collapsing your face.
Now get your face together.
My face is together, you just can't tell because I'm wearing a mask.
For safety.
For safety.
Protecting the pack.
No, I was gonna wear my craft center mask, but I think it's in the wash actually. Oh no, wait, it's an Arts NC State mask, that's right. I should have made a pumpkin mask.
Mm-hmm.
You got a scary mask on.
Yeah.
Got the wolf on there.
Full pack.
Full pack. Speaking of pack, I have not carved a wolf. I mean, that kind of looks like a wolf.
I thought it was a wolf.
It's totally a cat though. I think my cat was still alive when I carved that pumpkin. I was like, let me do a cat dedication. Didn't work out.
You went semi-lusso.
Yeah. I'm kind of doing this poking method, so like the shape of the mouth changes angles all the time, so I'm just starting on one angle and pushing in. So now I'm able to go in there and pry out some of this mouth. While you're pulling out these bigger pieces, you know, you might see the face start to bend a little bit. That's not good. We don't want that.
That's a fun face though.
Is it? Is it readable from our faraway Facebook camera?
Mm-hmm. That looks like puzzle piece eyes.
Puzzle piece eyes?
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Sometimes you have to like cut the pieces out in pieces. That's fun.
Look at that bracing pinky work.
Oh yeah, I hope I'm not messing up my eyeball on the other side. Luckily I did it so far ahead of time that I think it firmed up a little bit, but it's really easy to mesh up the other side. Alright, so I've cut out everything, and when you look at this pumpkin face, he looks really rough, right? One thing I wanted to make sure I talk about is when you're carving, you get through your pumpkin, a way to make your carvings, your cutouts look more open is to carve away at what is kind of underneath the surface. You don't have to do that with a knife. I found it's really easy to do that with a toothpick. I don't know if you can get really close to this, Katie. Let's see if we can't get this on camera. Okay, so I'm going to push away all of that clay that's kind of hanging out on the inside. Be careful you don't collapse it. Look more open.
Yeah.
By comparison?
Yeah.
Can Facebook see that?
Let's grab Facebook.
I always tell people that it's gonna look worse before it looks better. So we'll show Facebook what we're talking about. We're cutting away inside the pumpkin. Not really touching the surface. Just scraping away the inside angles that we don't need. As for the outside of the pumpkin, I like to call them little boogers, but all these little extra pieces of clay that show up on the edges, as they dry, which is going to happen really quickly, you'll be able to just brush them away. Once you finish like carving your pumpkin, you know, you're going to spend a lot more than 20 minutes carving your pumpkin and fine-tuning it. Maybe you carve it for like an hour, walk away, come back to it. Maybe you do it for a week. It's your pumpkin, right? But that's what I like doing, is the fine-tuning of it. Kind of always come back to it with fresh eyes. See what wants to crumb away after a little while. Alright, and I'm going to go back and do that same thing inside my pumpkin, but I'm going to try and do it with the knife. It's a little harder with the knife because the knife is so bulky. Oh yeah, that makes all the difference. But as I start getting into these teeth, oh man, those teeth, they're so fragile, they're not held on by much, so you really have to make sure you're supporting it. If when you're carving, it happens, you make a big mistake, your pumpkin falls apart, then you're going to have to reassemble your pumpkin, and I recommend doing it immediately. Don't take the piece that broke off and set it aside and try and assemble it later. You want to try and put it back together right then, and then let it rest for a little bit. You're going to probably use a little bit of slip. I'm going to use a little bit of slip right now to kind of smooth out the mouth of my pumpkin. Oh, he's so lovely. I mean, scary, spooky pumpkin.
Evil.
He's
dubious.
I like this mouth. It almost makes up for not having a nose.
You could just give him a little dimple of a nose. Nose impression. Shove a candy corn in it later.
He's already got an eyeball on the back of his head.
Doesn't make it a nose.
Poor guy. Maybe I will shove a candy corn. There's no reason you can't customize these after you get them back. Glue.
Yeah, if you made a little dimple, a candy corn would fit right in that recess.
I love it. Alright. How'd it do?
Spooky.
Alright. How much time we got? I want to make sure I talk about some...
12.
12 minutes?
Uh-huh.
Okay. The piece of paper that you take home has 7 really big rules that I need you to remember while you're carving your pumpkin. This especially goes for the little kids. I'm all for anybody of any age carving a pumpkin, but they might need to be supervised. The number one thing is not to cut off the top of your pumpkin. That's the first thing that we do when we carve a real pumpkin, not a clay pumpkin. Whatever you turn in to me to be fired needs to be one solid piece. If some parts of it breaks off in the handling or the firing, it doesn't happen that often, I'll try and keep it with it so that you can glue it back later. But your lid will get glazed to your piece. I cannot facilitate pumpkin lids. Hence the need for the hole in the bottom. We talked about the tea light hole. Remember, it's got to be at least 2 inches in the bottom. Any of the clay that you get off of your pumpkin, all of this stuff right here that I've collected, and I didn't really do the best job of keeping it wrapped up. I will say,
shame.
Yeah, shame.
Shame.
Over the years, I've noticed it's difficult to be having all this fun carving a pumpkin, and then you're also mindful of the stuff that you're just discarding. So I'm going to put that in my hand, I'm going to dab a little water, and I'm just going to kind of squish it around. Kind of squeeze through it and fold it. This would probably be a more difficult thing for the little ones to try. Because it gets so stiff as it dries out. But a little bit of, you know, mash it into the table magic, dab it with water, fold it, roll it, squeeze it, and in no time, this is going to be what I use to maybe make cat ears,
Eyebrows?
Eyebrows, warts, whatever.
Turn your boogers into boogers.
Turn your boogers into boogers. This talks about keeping all of your cutouts and your attachments on the thicker side to prevent them from cracking. Remember that what I talked about with gravity. If you're carving something with a big mouth, do that last, or create little props that you can put up inside of it to help it dry. And if it breaks while you're working on it, score it, slip it, and fix it. Anytime you're putting, let's say this was a really big cat ear, and I wanted to attach this to my pumpkin, I'm gonna make sure my connection points match, and I'm gonna use maybe my plastic fork, and I'm gonna scratch the piece that I'm attaching, and then I'm gonna scratch where it's going, and I'm gonna put slip, or just that water mixture, on one piece. Usually the piece that you're attaching is easier, because then it's everywhere you need it to be. And I'll push this into my pumpkin, and I'll compress it into the surface. That makes sure that it's really well attached. If something like this becomes attached later on, I can't reattach it for you. So compress, compress, compress. Talked about not using too much water. If I brush water all over the surface, like sometimes you'll be smoothing out the surface of this with your finger, it's gonna get a little slimy, and then you need to let it dry. Basically, if your pumpkin looks really wet and glossy and also lighter in color, don't touch them for a little while. Leave them for like 10-15 minutes and come back uncovered. Do remember to put your initials on the bottom of your pumpkin, or see if you can't carve them on the inside, and take a photo of it, maybe a selfie with it on your phone before you turn it back into us. That way it'll be really easy for you to claim it. Sometimes pumpkins aren't recognizable when you get them back. And when you do bring them back, keep them wrapped up. However your pumpkin looked when you got it, if you can bring it back that way, great. Again, it's really easy to break something that's totally bone dry. The printout that you get when you pick up a pumpkin is going to have my email address on it. It's got this fabulous pumpkin. And I think that pretty much sums it up. I'm going to keep working on this clay right here. I feel like I got to add like some warts and eyebrows now.
Yeah, it needs an eyebrow.
Definitely. A single eyebrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You got it.
A different kind of unibrow.
I think the eyebrow should go over this rounded eye. Like this guy's eyebrow. Like just up there. Alright.
That eye's got a nice rainbow shape.
It needs to look hairy.
Yeah, texture.
Use my plastic fork. I didn't even use my garlic press.
You said you didn't want it.
I could make the, we should try it. I'm not afraid to try it.
Just to see what we see?
Just to see what we see. Maybe actually, if I made an eyebrow or a cat ear, I don't have to attach it right away. I can set this aside while I decide if that's what I want to do. Let's put a bit of clay in here. This could be the eyebrow. Oh my goodness. Okay. That is some very fragile stuff. I'm going to take my toothpick and I'm going to scrape it off of there. I think he needs a hairy eyebrow, but I'm going to put this in conjunction with his real eyebrow. Okay, I've got it on the toothpick. I've got a spot for the eyebrow. Come here, eyebrow. Okay, I can do this. I'm going to put it behind the eyebrow. Nope, it's going to be difficult. Okay. Ah!
Man, down.
Eyebrow down. This dude's eyebrow is even an eyebrow, it's like a hairy wart.
It's like a growth, it's not even a wart. It's a tumor.
The hair is super realistic though. I'm a fan. Yeah.
It almost looks like a fat carrot.
A fat carrot?
Yeah.
So the little hairs that are kind of standing up, this is what I was talking about earlier. I'm just gonna push them into the surface of the clay because they're gonna break off. But that doesn't mean that they can't be there in spirit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we go, if you're carving your pumpkin and you put it on social media, you can tag the Craft Center in it. We totally want to share all of your pumpkins. If you're on Instagram, you should share it with at the Craft Center. If you don't already follow us on Instagram or Facebook, definitely find us, like us, follow us, share us, be with us, make it work. You can share some Craft Center hashtags, which we can make, hashtag we can make it, hashtag make it here, hashtag make it work, hashtag
Craft relief.
hashtag think and do, hashtag pumpkin spice, hashtag happy Halloween. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. Whoever you last couple people are, I appreciate you. I appreciate Katie for being my moderator and my pumpkin partner in crime.
Everyone needs a pumpkin partner.
Yeah, the clay is really stuck in this.
I'm gonna have to take your toothpick in there.
Oh, look what I grabbed.
Wow.
Get out of my head.
It's like I'm a potter.
It's a kitchen potter. Yeah. Yeah, that was probably not a good idea.
You know, it was a great idea.
I want to like do something with this.
Meat tenderizer. We learned that.
Meat tenderizer. What was that? My mom that chimed in? Do you remember what your favorite pumpkin was that somebody carved?
My favorite pumpkin has been and will always be Witch Please.
Witch Please?
Yes. It will not get better for
Witch
than Witch Please. For everyone who wasn't here before. Witch Please.
I have some friends that carve pumpkins every year at the Craft Center.
Well, not this year, but
well, they've already registered. They emailed me.
they'll be crafting from home.
They'll be crafting from home, but they show up every year, and one of them carves a space, but then they pull off as much extra clay from their pumpkin as possible, and they just add on to it. It was almost like the pumpkin is wearing a mask. What about that one year when Shauna turned her pumpkin into an octopus?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
It didn't even look like a pumpkin. And if that's what you want to do, go for it, you know, like.
The world is your oyster.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all those bits.
There's a whole bunch of bits in there. I should probably write my name on it.
You should.
Use my nail.
Might confuse it with my pumpkin.
I'm gonna write 2020 in here. Beans. Yeah, I'll probably let them dry and work on them a little bit more. Fine tune them.
Any last words? We've got 30 seconds remaining in our broadcast.
My last words are happy pumpkin carving and thanks for supporting the Craft Center. And I cannot wait to see what you guys do with all my pumpkins. So, thanks.